nice of you all to have stayed. I shall keep it short. A long time ago, there were two boys who lived in the same village, and while in some ways they were very, very similar, in other ways they were very, very different. Will, on the one hand, was kind and thoughtful and generous, although his parents were very poor. And John, on the other, was mean and lazy and indolent, while his parents were very, very rich. Now, one fine autumn morning, Will woke up and he decided that while his parents were at work, he would go out into the forest to collect firewood so they could come home to a nice warm house. So off he went, and is for Mother. And then he grabbed another one, he put it in his right-hand pocket and he said, this one is for Father. And he grabbed a third, cracked it open and hom! And this one is for me. And that's how he went on. This one's for Mother. This one's for Father. This one's for me. Mother, Father, me. Mother, Father, me. Until at last his pockets were groaning and his stomach was, for the first time in many months, full. Now, Will was wearing hand-me-downs with big pockets, and he'd been very hungry, so this had all taken quite some time. So much time that by the time he was back down on the tree, the sun was dipping below the horizon and the shadows were starting to lengthen. And all those stories from his grandmother's story well came popping into his head about wolves and goblins and witches that all liked to eat little boys. But as well as being kind and thoughtful and generous, Will was also quite brave, and he realised he couldn't just stand there waiting for something to happen to him, so he screwed up his courage and he began to march off down the path. And he was overjoyed when at last he saw flickering just by the roadside a light, a warm light, a friendly light. It was the light in a roadside shrine. But this wasn't some kind of just pile of pebbles with a lamp there. This was a shrine built by a practical people. So you had enough space to put a couple of horses inside, a shelter to keep the rain off, and a ladder leading up to a hayloft, where if you were a small boy who was really quite tired and well fed by now, you could curl up and fall instantly asleep. However, because there is always a however, it wasn't long before Will was woken up by strange noises coming from below. Oh yeah, I lined up 5 cows and I pushed them over like a set of dominoes. Oh, it was good. Will peered over the edge and he saw all over the floor small misshapen creatures with hooked noses, with sharp pointed teeth, with gleams in their eyes. Goblins, wearing hats to keep their lank hair cut down and belts to keep their trousers up, and with each belt there was tied a golden hammer. Now we listened to the goblins tell their exploits and what they'd been up to for quite a while, until at last a slightly bigger goblin got up and he said, "Settle down, all right. Time for dinner. What do you want to eat?" So, what do you want to eat?
Oreo cake.
Oreo cake! Right, Oreo cake it is. Bang! He took out the hammer and a shower of golden sparks emitted it. And every time they hit the floor, an Oreo cake appeared. Who's next? Is there something from over there?
Toasted cheese.
Toasted cheese! I love toasted cheese. Good choice. Bang, 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 bang. Sparks everywhere. Mountains of toasted cheese. Anything else?
Yorkshire pudding.
Oh, Yorkshire pudding. Bang. And we'll have some beef to go with it, and beer to wash it down with, and wine, and maybe champagne, because it's a special evening. And when the dinner was ready, the goblins dived in, and they ate and they drank, and as they did so, all these wonderful smells floated up to where Will was hiding. And he began to feel hungry again. And he thought, well, I've got this pocket full of walnuts. I'm sure my parents won't mind if I just ate one. So he pulled it out and he cracked it open. And down below, the goblins froze. The goblins looked up. And the goblins ran away screaming, going, "Ah, the sky's going to fall on my head, run away!" Now, Will might be kind and thoughtful and generous and brave, but he was not stupid, and he knew an opportunity when one presented itself. So he was down that ladder, scooped up the golden hammer that had been left behind, and out running through the forest as fast as his little legs could carry him. Until at last, he came to the warm lights of his home village and his parents' loving embrace. Now, I'm sure you can tell, that family began to go up in the world. They were never hungry. They saw to it that no one in the village was ever hungry again, and their stock began to rise. And this did not escape the beady little eyes of John. And one day, John decided to get hold of Will and get the entire story out of him. Will told him everything. And when he heard about the golden hammer, John thought, well, if they can do that with one, what can I do? So the very next day, he stomped off into the forest. He climbed up the walnut tree, shoved some in his pockets, tried one. Not for him. Found the shrine, went up the ladder, into the hayloft, sat there waiting, and at some point he must have fallen asleep. Because sure enough, he was woken up by noises from below. Oh, well, I lured an old woman into a stream pretending to be a child in trouble, so her shoes got stuck in the mud and she had to walk all the way home with bare feet. And again, another goblin, not the same one, he had no hammer, got up, proceeded to create a feast in exactly the same way. Showers of golden sparks, beautiful food, wonderful smells, and when the goblins were all digging in, John thought, right, here we go, snap! And the goblins froze. And the goblins looked up, and the goblins said, "Fool us once, shame on us. Fool us twice, shame on you." Or maybe even the other way around. "Come down, human child." And white-faced, John came down from that hayloft. And the goblins pounced on him, one holding each limb, while another delicately tapped his tongue with a mallet and a single golden spark landed on it. And a sixth goblin began to pull, and pull, and pull until that tongue went right round that shrine 5 times over. And then chuckling gleefully, they scattered, running out into the night. Well, that did not go as intended. So he gathered his tongue up and he rolled it up and he flipped it over his shoulder. And while he was doing this, he started to think quite hard about his life and what had brought him to this point. Going home, he thought maybe, just maybe, he hadn't made all the decisions that he should have. And he thought he would just, on the off chance, try doing something nice for someone. So eventually he got to a point in the path where, although it carried on to his village, there was another path that joined it, but there was no way over the river running next to it. And everyone was always really annoyed because they had to go miles out of their way. And he thought, I could do something about this. Used his tongue as a bridge. And it wasn't long before some travellers came past and they were delighted to be like, hey, go over they went. More and more travellers and people, word began to spread and they left offerings of food and offerings of beer and a little money, and word eventually worked its way back to Will, who said, that sounds like goblin magic. And so he went down to the river and he saw John sitting there. He's like, ah! And And Will took out his hammer and he tapped the tongue and a single golden spark landed on it. And the tongue went back to normal size. And then Will tapped the ground and created a bridge of fine, lasting stone. And he reached out a hand and John took it. And together the two boys walked back towards the village and they talked about all the things they now had in common. And it wasn't long before it became known that where you could find one boy, the other wouldn't be far away. And that's how it stayed, from that day on and for the rest of their long and happy lives.